Thank you very much for the introduction, John. You're very welcome this morning, and I'm going to take a bit of an alternative approach to social media. So I can guarantee that I'm not going to stand here and tell you about the latest social media channels that you should be using, how if you're not over Instagram, you're going to lose out. We're going to take a different approach and talk about something that is not being recognised within organisations. It's been overshadowed by our fancy lights from our Snapchat filters. It's been overshadowed by all of the updates from the likes of Facebook and Instagram. And that topic which we're going to focus on this morning is social media crisis management. Now, after today's session, I would like you to have more of an understanding of what a potential social media crisis would look like for your organisation and some of the steps that you can take to try and mitigate those crises. So we promise we will have fun. It won't be all serious. We don't want anybody going back and thinking, oh my goodness, we're in real danger. But there's going to be some tips that you can take back to your organisation. So what is the risk? Well, there is an estimated 7.5 billion people in the world, and the UN have recently completed a study which estimates that about 6 billion out of the 7.5 have access to a mobile device. So whenever you think about that, let's just put it in context. There's more people who have mobile devices than have access to a working toilet. So that's quite phenomenal. And those mobile devices are the same devices that you have in your pocket, and that's also the same devices that your shareholders have, that your stakeholders have, and your customers have. So inevitably, that creates a number of opportunities, but also inevitably creates a number of risks for your organisation as well. So within our world population, there are 2.7 billion active social media users, and 60% of people who use social media actively leave reviews, comment, and give feedback on brands and products online. So does that mean that every day your business has a risk of 2.7 billion people in terms of your reputation? Well, thankfully, that doesn't have to be the case. Whenever we talk about social media crisis management, it's something that's not discussed a lot within the digital marketing world, and even less so within organisations. Because let's be honest, it's a bit of a scary topic. If you come back to the office and say, right, okay, what about social media crisis management? What are we going to do? You're going to get some negative responses, and people are going to say, don't think about that. Put that to the back of your mind. Let's focus on all the things that we can do through social media. However, my role as a digital marketing consultant sees me working with a number of charities, startups, SMEs, and agencies, and creating effective digital marketing strategies across website, e-commerce, email marketing, and social media. And one of the things that I have noticed from this work is that nobody is talking about the potential risk from social media. So why do we need to be aware of that? Well, let's be honest, who this morning has Instagram a picture of their breakfast? Go on, you're not being honest. Who has checked in on Twitter or Facebook to let people know that you're here? Yeah, we share so many micro moments from our lives. We share so much information about what we're doing, who we're with, and that's just how society has developed. So we have witnessed a phenomenal growth in social media influencers, social media celebrities, and bloggers. Lots of brands are paying for people to talk about their products online. So it's definitely no longer the case of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Absolutely not. What happens in Vegas stays on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. And that's something that we need to be very mindful of. So whenever we talk about social media, it's important to understand some of the main elements and how they can impact a social media crisis. So as an organisation, we have to realise that communication is a two-way street. Our customers expect us to be on social media, and they expect us to respond to their queries, tweets, and communications. Equally, there is an expectation that we should be responding in real time. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, they're channels that exist 24 hours a day. So even whenever your social media or comms team has gone home at 5 p.m. to enjoy their lives, our consumers are still online. They're still contacting us, they're still tweeting us, they're still asking questions. So have a think about that for your organisation. Do you have a strategy or a plan for managing that communication outside of your core office hours? We cannot underestimate the importance of listening to what our customers and what the market is saying, not only about our own product or services, also about our brand, about our competitors, and about the industry as a whole. So by listening to the conversations that are happening, we can be aware of some of the potential issues that could unfold, and we can track the sentiment in the market. So something to consider is whether you've invested in any social media listening tools, or how are you able to hear the conversations that are happening around your brand, not only within your potential customers, but also within your market. So let's have a look at when we actually have a social media crisis on our hands. And a social media crisis is really that fear of a rogue employee taking to Twitter, of a data breach within your organization, of a confidential information circulating the World Wide Web. It is an instance that we have not potentially planned for that could have devastating effects on our organization. And it's really important to note that if we have got a situation on our hands which elicits a response of anger, not only are we going to have to deal with the customers who are affected, we're going to have to deal with a whole series of trolls. So there is nothing that's going to travel faster on social media than Beyoncé's new album, except for anger. And the New York Times recently completed a study to say that anger is the one emotion that spreads the fastest across social media. So, if you do not have an adequate plan for managing a social media crisis, this might be what your comms team looks like Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, trying to put out a fire without the adequate resources. And the reality is that that fire could quickly get out of control, and that could create a real issue for your organisation. So, earlier on, John asked you to take a few minutes to fill in your postcard and consider what some potential risks might be in terms of social media. So can you take out your postcard again? We're going to have a look at what you have put down as your answer. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to individually list your risk, but have a look at that just for a moment. And visualise that what you have written on that slide is a reality. Would your team, would your comms team, would your digital team be able to manage that? Do you have a plan in place right now to deal with the backlash that could potentially be created online? I'll let you figure out that one for yourselves. So we're going to have a look at some organisations that have had the misfortune of dealing with a social media crisis. And I'm going to be really obvious and start with the campaign that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about in great detail. So you will be aware of the United Airlines fiasco, where a passenger was removed from a flight. And it in itself was not a social media issue because the incident happened within the plane. However, a fellow passenger recorded the altercation on her mobile phone and posted that to Facebook. Now, that video has been viewed 10 million times since, so it has devastating impacts on the United Airlines brand. But that's not the scariest part. The scariest part is the anger that was created amongst not only current customers, but potential customers, and amongst society in general, people taking to social media vowing never to fly United Airlines again. So that had some real damaging effects for the brand. As you can see from the materials, society at large created some memes, GIFs, and entirely offensive materials around the incident. For example, they have repurposed one of United Airlines' advertising strategies, saying, if we don't beat our competitors, we beat our customers. We've also seen a remake of the logo with the United Airlines as what could be interpreted as blood. We're also seeing that very bad timing for the organisation in terms of Apple phone update. So it talks about its drag and drop feature. And again, for the brand, it's hard to know if that was a real life update or if that's something that has been created by people online trying to capitalise on this feeling of anger and trying to capitalise on that campaign. So not only did this social media crisis and the crisis entirely wipe over 1 billion off the share price of United, it opened the door for a lot of controversial content to start doing the rounds online. So a number of celebrities joined in and voiced their opinion about the issue, and one such celebrity was Jimmy Kimmel, who created a mock advertisement for United Airlines.
We're United Airlines. You do what we say, when we say, and there won't be a problem. Capiche? If we say you fly, you fly. If not, tough.
Oh my God! Look at what you did!
Give us a problem, and we'll drag your ass off the plane. And if you resist, we'll beat you so badly, you'll be using your own face as a flotation device. United Airlines, you.
Another example of social media crisis management, and a rather unexpected one, was whenever HMV let go of 60 staff at once. And that was quite controversial because it was very unexpected, but also they didn't quite audit all of their social media channels to realize that one of the members of staff who was being let go had access to the Twitter platform. So as you can imagine, the staff member was fairly outraged at the decision, and they decided to live tweet in real time, letting society at large know about the developments that were happening. Now, there's 125,000 followers on the HMV Twitter page, so it does have far-reaching effects. Obviously, that employee was disciplined, but it took quite a while for the brand to catch on what was happening, and within one of the tweets, you can see that the marketing director is asking, how do I shut down Twitter? How do I get rid of this mess? Which would suggest very strongly that they didn't have a social media crisis plan, or indeed, the person who was executing the tweets was perhaps meant to be the one trying to manage crises online as well. It seems that United Airlines is not the only airline that has found itself in a controversial situation online. And recently, Ryanair were doing a live Twitter chat, and people were invited to come along and speak to Michael O'Leary. So rather unexpectedly for the brand, Michael O'Leary responded to a retweet by another Twitter user with some sexist comments. So, for any social media managers within the audience today, it's worthwhile to be mindful of any personalities within your organisation that might need factored into your social media plans. Not quite controversial in that sense, but equally damaging for British Airways. A passenger was very disgruntled with their customer service experience with British Airways, and not only did they tweet about it, but they decided to promote their tweet, which meant that they were investing money to ensure that that tweet reached a very large audience. So the downside of this was that it took British Airways 8 hours to actually identify and respond to the tweet because they weren't manning their social media channels outside the hours of 9 to 5 p.m. So it's worth considering, does your business operate 24 hours a day? And if so, will your customers be expecting you to be online 24 hours a day also? An example that is rather bizarre, but very realistic, was Amy's Baking Company, which was featured on Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. So Amy, if you've watched the show, you will know, has a rather unique personality, but throughout the show, she clashed very much with Gordon's opinions and was quite controversial. However, it's important to note here that she was aware that the show would be going live. She was aware of how she was portrayed because she took part in filming the show. So whenever the show was aired, there was a lot of negative response on social media, and people were obviously voicing their opinions around that. And it began off fairly upset, but nothing in comparisons to how it escalated. And we see that Amy is calling all of the followers who were slagging her off little punks, claiming that you are nothing, we are laughing at you, and you are just fools. So you can imagine that's not quite within the brand guidelines. That's not how you're going to describe your customers. However, as the abuse online escalated, so did her response. So you can see the use of capital letters, which shows a lot of aggression. And she goes as far to saying, you don't know us, we will thrive, we will overcome, starting to really get aggressive and nasty. So this escalated into a series of posts overnight. It continued further until probably the next morning when she woke up and thought, ooh, right, that maybe wasn't the best idea. Slagging off most of society on social media, and probably woke up to an internet sensation, a crazy storm on her page. So, what do you do in that scenario? You claim that your page was hacked. It must be hacked. We wouldn't write something like that. We're investigating with the FBI. So maybe not the smoothest recovery ever. However, this is a real example of a social media crisis, and this would definitely be one of the examples that appears out of the blue. So here is a really nice example to finish up on for live examples of crises, and this is a handmade burger company. So a customer sent a Facebook message into the handmade burger company and let them know that they enjoyed a fantastic meal at their restaurant. However, there was a bit of an incident in the bathroom. Now, it's visually portrayed above, so I won't go into details and you can use your imagination as to what happened. But let's just say that the hand dryer wasn't very strategically placed in relation to the toilet itself. So the customer got in touch to say that they had a rather negative experience. They came out with wet trousers and trainers and socks, and that kind of put a little bit of a dampener, excuse the pun, on their evening. So the company responded in an appropriate manner to say, "Thank you for getting in touch. We recognise that there was an issue here, and unfortunately this is the first time it has happened. However, we will compensate you with trainers and a year's supply of socks." And they actually went as far as creating a rather humorous image there of the team going in ready to tackle whatever scenario they might find in the bathroom. So it is important to keep in mind that you don't need to treat every single social media crisis with extreme response. It might be appropriate just to try and dampen that response and take it offline, or indeed take people to another channel where you can then deal with that query more efficiently. So it's time to apply a reality check to your business. If you had the scenario written on your card, if that was a reality for you right now, would your teams be able to handle that scenario? Or would you find yourself in the scenario of SpongeBob and Squidward here, running around in a bit of a panic? Well, the good news is there are a number of things that you can do to help mitigate the risk from social media and to help you become more prepared. It's worth noting that it's not a question of if a social media crisis will happen, but when. And there is a reason why the cliche, "prepare for the worst, but hope for the best," is so popular, and that's because it's really good advice. So your first starting point is to think about some of the potential social media crises that could occur, get your team together and start to work through a plan of how you would react in that scenario. The next step is to listen and preempt. So as I mentioned before, you can't underestimate the value of listening to the conversations that are happening within your market, that are happening between your consumers, within your audience. So by listening, you're able to identify what the sentiment is and track any issues that are coming through. And it's also possible to preempt issues as well. So you'll have some things such as obvious issues within your business, things that you're probably aware of, such as a potential product recall, a potential service outage due to weather, for example. And these are things that are more highly likely to happen than something really random. Therefore, you should be considering those scenarios and creating a plan around that. Secondly, you should be looking at the scenarios which are in the periphery of your brand. So whilst they might not actually be live, there is a risk that if they were given oxygen, that you would have a real fire in your hands. So start to plan for them as well. Be realistic about some of the things that could become a reality. And third element, and this is the most difficult one, is trying to consider stuff that could happen out of the blue. So this could be the likes of the United Airlines scenario. They had absolutely no idea that this would unfold on one of their planes. And in fact, the first that they probably heard of it was on social media. But in saying that, you might not know the specifics around the social media crisis, but you need to have a plan as to who, where, when, and how you respond in that scenario. I have a really great example from Late Rooms, who used the power of their social media listening tools to dampen a potential social media crisis. So they were listening to conversations happening on forums online, and they identified that a disgruntled customer who had stayed in one of their properties was going onto a forum and advising other people not to book through Late Rooms. So because they were able to track this early on, they identified that customer's details within their own system and contacted that customer offline and was able to resolve the issue. As a result, the customer was so impressed with the way that they'd managed it, he went back on, deleted all of his negative comments, and eventually then the forum was shut down. So because they were able to listen, identify the issue, deal with it and take it offline, a social media crisis was essentially avoided in that scenario. So in terms of your organisation, it's important to identify some things that could be a potential risk. And these apply regardless of what market that you may be in. In terms of potential risks, we're really looking at things such as human error. Mistakes do happen. What if your social media manager posts the wrong image or shares some confidential information online? You need to be prepared if that does happen and know the steps that you need to take as an organisation to correct that. Other risks are not paying attention on social media. So for example, if you have a team of people that feed into your social media accounts, you need to be very clear about who monitors what, where and when, because there could be the assumption that somebody else is looking after that, or somebody is monitoring the messages, and that gives opportunity for something to get out of hand and escalate more than it really should. Other risks are malicious apps and software. So we have heard about the Locky app, which was shared via JPEG image. Whenever people opened that in their phone, it captured all of their data. So you can imagine how embarrassing that would be if your brand was one of the people that shared that across social media. There'd be a lot of explaining to do. So you need to be aware of all the latest threats in terms of security, privacy, and viruses going around. Other threats could be phishing scams, and we've seen examples for the likes of Qantas and Emirates Airlines where there have been fake pages set up offering around the world trip, airfare, for example. And whilst it's a really nice thought, it's not realistically going to be a prize. So in the scenario like that, you have got pages trying to capture your customer data. So as well as understanding what your customers are saying about your brand, it's important to figure out where your brand has got presence and make sure there's nobody there trying to imitate your brand. And last but not least, you need to be aware of your own privacy settings. So if you are a business owner or if you are in a comms team and you're responsible for a social media channel, do you know exactly who in your organization has got access to your social media channels? What level of access do they have? And does that access need to be revoked in any shape or form? And this is especially the case if we've got interns or if we have got people coming in helping out with social media, which is generally the case with SMEs. We get somebody in to get us started or help us out. If that person still has access, that's a vulnerable risk to your organization. So it's really useful to do an audit of all of your social media channels to identify any gaps that could create a social media crisis. So what we should be doing in terms of our social media channels is looking at passwords. So do you use the same password across a number of devices or platforms? What kind of level of authority do your social media managers and users have to that platform? And have you applied the latest security systems and updates not only to your social media channels, but to your networks? And you might think, what are the chances of somebody actually hacking my social media channels? Well, that happened to Burger King. So Burger King's Twitter page was taken over by McDonald's. Not actually, but somebody hacked it and rebranded everything in terms of the McDonald's branding and claimed that they were taking over the company because the Whopper was a flopper. So you can imagine that that was very embarrassing for the company. It's also worth reviewing the kind of access that people have to your social media channels, particularly Facebook. So if you enable reviews, you need to be aware that those reviews can't be deleted. If you enable people to check in to your location, you need to be aware that that's associated to your page. And also, are visitors able to actually post on your profile themselves? Are they able to come on and leave a comment? Because if so, there are areas for consideration and potential risk. So in terms of managing a social media crisis and preparing for the worst, something that is a fantastic idea but does take a little bit of work is to create a social media crisis simulation. And a social media crisis simulation is whereby you sit down and map some potential crises that could occur for your organization, and you try and replicate those in a scenario that makes it as live as possible. Now, this gives you an opportunity to put your social media crisis plan into action. You get to see how your team react under pressure, and you get to identify areas where you need to develop your social media crisis plan. The worst instance for you realizing that your social media crisis plan doesn't add up is in the middle of a live crisis. That's a situation you do not want to be in. So also in terms of helping you planning and helping mitigate against the risk from social media crisis, it's very useful to develop policies, guidelines and procedures so that not only your comms team are informed, but the wider organisation. It's also really useful to map if somebody within another department spots something unfolding on social media, and if they have visibility of this kind of guideline, they will know the appropriate steps to take to make you or the relevant people aware. Equally, for new people that join your organisation, this is a really good process, and it also helps you envisage all of the elements that need to come together to help you mitigate risks from potential social media crises. So I'm just going to finish on this point, and hopefully there's some insights that you can take away today, some ways that you can help reduce the risk from a social media crisis. And Warren Buffett says it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll start to do things slightly differently. So thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully there are some insights that you're able to take back into your organisation, and hopefully you're not going to go home and shut down all your social media channels now. Thank you.